decades ago. I don't remember exactly when I was launched into space. I don't remember exactly why, but what I do remember is that I bought a box full of the best pop culture films and shows. The first week in space was great, but it all went downhill when I went to dump my waste into space. I made a mistake and pressed the wrong button and opened the door to storage room A. My VHS box was launched into space. I went insane due to lack of entertainment and became the Contrarian. Decades later, my ship crashed onto Earth, and I finally got a chance to watch my favorite VHS tapes. When I was done, I was excited to learn that all of my favorite films have had sequels and spin-offs. Little did I know, I was about to go insane again. Captain's Log. Number 1. Actually, I don't think I'm the captain. Well, Contrarians Log. Number 1. Into the Spider-Verse. Is it good? Is it bad? Does it hold up? We'll find out together. Let's see. Let's go into it. Let's see. Alright, so when I first crashed into Earth, one of the first films that I watched was the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, which the first two obviously were great. I grew up with them. I loved them. The third one was really weird, but apparently has a lot of meme value now, so I'm learning what memes are now that I'm back on Earth again. So I started watching the ones that came out with starring Andrew Garfield. The first one was not really good, in my opinion, and I didn't feel like watching the second one. So I saw that there was another reboot with Tom Holland, and I watched those films, and those were really, really good. Really top-notch Spider-Man films. So but the best Spider-Man film that I saw since crashing back to Earth was Into the Spider-Verse. I loved it. It's amazing. And then the sequel came out, and this video is actually supposed to be about the sequel of Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah, I believe it's Across the Spider-Verse. Yeah. But I was watching the first film again and taking notes, and I realized that I had more to say, and I picked up on things that I didn't realize in previous viewings, and I would like to share them with you today. Alright, so before going into the plot and characters, I want to talk about my influences. I started this YouTube channel because of my love of film criticism and films in general, and my favorite film reviewers are Mahler, The Critical Drinker, Rags, Fringy, and the rest of the EFAP gang, and the Open Bar gang. I can't, not everybody's names are coming to my mind at once, but that whole space has been very informative and entertaining over the past year since I've crashed back to Earth. So, all right, let's get into it. First, I want to talk about art. Is it subjective or objective? I know this debate has been going around for a while, but I just wanted to say my opinion about it, or my thoughts on it. I feel like art can be more subjective, but when you bring in the craft of storytelling, that is where it's almost like biological and scientific. I know that sounds crazy, but my reason being is us humans invented stories based off of things that actually happened. So the hero's journey is a story that is in every single culture because it is the behaviors and circumstances that the most heroic person in the village, how they were. And so the village would tell stories about that person. And then it, the snake became a dragon. Like, say the guy killed a snake and saved some kids. And then, over the years, the dramatization of storytelling, the snake got bigger and bigger and it became like the dragon. And that's in every culture. So, and then of course, the idea that when you're writing a story, you're creating a world and you're creating rules for this world. And so if you break your own rules, then it's an objectively bad story. And the more you break those rules that you yourself made, then the worse the film is. So those are my opinions or my thoughts. I know opinion is a bad word. It's a overused word. Those are my thoughts on that. So let's move on to the plot. I'm not going to go deeply into the plot of Into the Spider-Verse. Before I move on, I do want to say I don't have a system yet to deal with live comments or chats. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. And I kind of wanted to see how my first episode would be received. So, yeah, I won't be responding to live comments, but I will be responding to them over chat or over text, like after this episode's over. But in future episodes, I hope to have a system set up. So anyway, let's move on. The plot. My idea about plots, my thoughts about plots is my preference is a character-heavy film rather than a plot-heavy film. I know that a complicated plot can be a great story, and a lot of people like complicated plots, but it's just my personal preference to have the focus be more on the characters, because what I've observed in films is when there's a plot heavy or world building and plot heavy story, then there's less focus on the characters and their relationships and how they relate to each other. So I know if someone has a lot of time and is crafting like a novel for years, then they can do both. But nowadays, it seems like writers don't have a lot of time. So if someone chooses to allocate that time to characters, I prefer those type of films because you can maintain a simple plot. It's like rules easier if it's more simple. So, the plot for Spider-Verse, it kind of feels complicated because it's about interdimensional travel. But if you kind of understand that concept going in, it's really simple. Bad guy makes a machine to open up portals to other dimensions for personal reasons that we'll go into when we go through character. And good guys realize that it could cause or does cause severe damage to the world and the individuals that are in other dimensions. So they are trying to turn that machine off. Very basic, very, very simple. And you kind of like, once you understand it, you're like, all right, that's what the whole goal is. And then you can focus on all of the character work in this film. So that being said, that's the plot. Everybody knows that. Oh yeah, spoiler reviews. This film has been out for 5 years. All right. So first I want to talk about Peter Parker. the Peter Parker that opens the film, who is in Miles's universe. This Peter Parker, even though doesn't have a lot of screen time, I feel like this film pays a lot of respect to the character and the lore and the backstory of Peter Parker. It's going into this film, I was kind of worried that Peter Parker would get the Last Jedi treatment of Luke Skywalker, and have just, make him just basically tear the character down so that another character can be viewed as, better or whatever. So I was worried about that, but I was relieved to see that he was exactly Peter Parker. He was a 26-year-old Peter Parker. Same backstory, sense of humor, charismatic, self-deprecating, but not like respectfully self-deprecating. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm an idiot, and it's not. Yeah, it's respectfully self-deprecating humor with like I think I'm mixing Peter Parker and Peter B. Parker. I'm not sure which one. Let's see. Oh, right, like with the Spider-Man Christmas song and all that stuff, and the little meta jokes about the Tobey Maguire dancing in Spider-Man 3. All that stuff was very respectfully done and entertaining and just fun to watch. And you kind of like want to watch this character throughout the film. But then it goes from that intro to Miles. And Miles Morales is a new character. And so there's a lot of work for the writers. I know he exists in the comics, but the film audience and the comics audience is very different. And from what I've heard from like comic book fans, Miles Morales' story and character was actually like, they did like the film writers like went even further in depth on his character, and he's even better in the film than the comics. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's what I've heard from comic book fans, that like they're surprised to see how awesome he was in this film. But anyway, so it opens up. You have a whole audience of people who are used to Peter Parker, and here's this new Spider-Man character, and the choice to have him like singing to himself with headphones on while drawing was the perfect decision to have the audience relate to this character, because I feel like that's the most relatable thing that like every teenager has had their headphones on, singing, going about their day, and kind of had like the pitchy, tone deaf singing because they can't hear themselves. And it's just, everybody's heard a teenager singing with headphones on. Everybody has been a teenager singing with headphones on. It's just extremely relatable and charming. And immediately, 2 seconds in, I like this guy. I like this Miles Morales. He's awesome. And the first thing you're introduced to is immediately he's interacting with his mom and dad, and they are already doing great work on showing their relationship. With his mom, it looks like he has a very close relationship with his mom. She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but there's a lot of characters in this movie. So, but what they do show, she is a good mom, a moral person, and he has a great relationship with his mom. For his dad's very, I mean, he's a police officer, so he's very like disciplined and kind of micromanagey in a way. So he's definitely a flawed character and kind of pushes his son in the best intentions in the direction that he feels is best for him, like most fathers would. And that's another thing about these characters in these movies is oftentimes in films you'll see, I think that, how do I want to say this? I think that the people in the film industry today think that some things are tropes in film when they're really not. They're rooted in human reality, like human behavior. And that is like characters with flaws. Because oftentimes you'll see films nowadays where there's a character who's loved by everybody and is good at everything. And I don't know if they're trying to subvert the quote-unquote trope of like the hero that is making mistakes and making the wrong decision and has character failures. So anyway, so when I say that Miles and his dad are both flawed characters, that is a massive compliment. They're not flawed in their personality. They have character flaws, and it makes them more relatable and real. And not for a second are you pulled out of this movie. You're just in it the whole time. And I love the way they show the character arc of Miles Morales through his decision to not tie his shoes, because I think it's just because he thinks it looks cool, and he always says, everybody tells him like, hey, your shoes are untied. He's like, I know, it's a choice. And yeah, so they have a strained relationship. The father and son dynamic, they definitely have a strained relationship, but yeah, but I think it's very relatable when people are teenagers. They naturally want to find their own identity, and you know, and it kind of makes your relationship with their parents a little bit awkward because they're still in charge of you because you're not fully a grown-up yet. So anyway, let's see, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so a character flaw that the father had. I don't remember his name because he's called dad throughout the entire film, so I didn't. I think his name is mentioned a couple times, but I didn't catch it. The dad kind of like jokingly, the scene that's really, really funny where the dad says like, all right, I love you. And he's like, all right, I know, Dad. All right, Dad. And then he like gets out of the car and he's like, hey, you gotta say I love you back, like in front of the entire school. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, like that's totally something a dad would do. And being annoyed at your teenager son, it's like, hey, don't ignore me. Like you're my son. Say I love you back. But also, it's like, it's kind of public humiliation. You don't like, that's embarrassing your son intentionally, which is not cool. So I would say that's a character flaw, but it makes him relatable and interesting, and like he reminds me of my dad. My dad would do stuff like that. So I don't know. I wanted to say something about Miles. Right, he's an artist, so he's going around and let me step back a little bit further. When he was walking through the city and everybody knows him, like everybody, so he's extroverted, he's very social, which I like this because it's differentiating his character from Peter Parker, because Peter Parker is kind of an introvert, kind of a geek, where Miles is a popular kid who's very smart, but he's a popular kid who's extroverted and very social and just loves hanging out with the people in his city. So I like that character difference between Peter and Miles. And yeah, just some more relatable stuff, like characters throw basketball to him and he like catches it and plays around with it, and then a girl says like, "Hey, I miss you," and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm still in the city. I still live here." And then he like pauses for a second. He's like, "Wait, she misses me?" It's like kind of like realizing like, "Hey, I think a girl likes me. Awesome." So it's like, anyway, super relatable character stuff, and but when it go and then the slapping the graffiti stickers on different areas in the city, that is a very minor character flaw because it's just a sticker and you can peel it off, but it is graffiti, which is a crime, and his dad is like kind of on him about that and is like, "Hey man, like I saw you put the stickers up over there, you gotta peel those down." And he's like, "Oh, you saw that? Shoot." And like, so it shows that there's a little bit of immaturity and rebellion in him, and yeah, it just makes him a rounded character. But he also talks about like when he goes into going to the new school, he talks about like, "Oh, I want to be like with the people. Like I don't want to go to this fancy school. Like I want to be with the people." So you can tell he's a good kid who's just a little rebellious. And yeah, so I think Miles is already in a really good place. And so yeah, and then it shows him in a new environment. It just showed him totally accepted in the environment he grew up in, and then now he's in an environment where he's not the only smart kid. Like the whole school is filled with geniuses, and but it just says a lot about his character when he walks into the building and he's immediately like greeting people and joking, and it's like, "Hey, what? I'm wearing the same thing as you. What a coincidence!" And just like trying to be funny and make people feel comfortable around him and make people laugh. And the joke being that like it's like a fancy private school, so everybody's dressed the same. Everybody has a school uniform, so it's like, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, great character work for Miles. And then I'm not going to go into Gwen Stacy yet, but he briefly meets Gwen Stacy, and that scene kind of confused me. So he goes in and he's late, and then he talks about time his relative, and Gwen laughs. And then the first thing Gwen says to Miles kind of confuses me. But I think I understand where they're going with it, but maybe it's me reading into it. She says like, "Hey, I like your joke. It wasn't funny, but it was smart, so I liked it." So it's kind of like, I was like, is she like negging her or negging him? Like the thing where you like say a backhanded compliment to a girl to like make just that kind of loser pickup artist technique. I was like, and I was like, kind of, when I first rewatched it, I was like, is that negging? What is that? And then I was like, oh no, her backstory, she loses a friend, so she's very hesitant to make friends, but I guess her natural personality is social, so she like connects with people. So I was like, maybe that's just showing, like, it's already showing that this character like wants to make friends but pushing them away. So it's kind of like this thing where you're like, "Hey," and then it's like immediately say something negative. But so yeah, it's like it feels like an internal struggle that she's dealing with. And I'm just going to go with that interpretation because I think it's better than just a jerk that says backhanded compliments, because no one likes that person that's like gives you a compliment and you're like, "Ah," and then they're like, "Yeah, but this thing, it sucks about you," and you're like, "Oh." Like no one likes someone like that. So I'm gonna go with my second interpretation of it. What do you guys think? What do you think that line was about? Why did she give a backhanded compliment? Or was it no big deal and I'm reading too much into it? Anyway, moving on. Let's see. So let's see. Miles. Okay, so from there he, like, a teacher kind of like catches him trying to fail in the school by getting all zeros. That was a cool moment. Shows how smart Miles is, and he kind of realizes his mistake. It was like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have guessed every question wrong. But then gives him an essay, and then he's kind of like sitting there like, I have to write this essay. And then he looks out to the city, and it's just such an extroverted moment where, like, you have to study, but like, the city is like calling to you. There's so much fun and excitement out there. So he goes out and he visits his uncle Aaron. And this character is an awesome character as well. Immediately you can tell, like, he has a very close relationship with his uncle. It's not strained at all. Like, he feels comfortable talking about girls with him. He's like, they're joking back and forth, and it's just like there's just a comfort. They're kindred spirits, I guess. And then he's like has his sketchbook with him, and his uncle's like, "Hey, you've been holding out on me," and like looks at his sketchbook, and he's supportive of his art. And I felt like this was a great way to show the difference between Aaron and his father, where his father is immediately going to like, "Hey, it's against the law to do graffiti. Like, don't do that." And it kind of at the same time is like stomping on his artistic skill. And where Aaron is like, "Let me see your art. Oh, this is great," and is very supportive and encouraging. But then at the same time, he's like, "Let's put this up on a wall. Let's spray paint." And it's like, so you can see the that he's kind of like a morally gray character. It's hinting to what's to come with Aaron. And so it's like, okay, but just like the fact that he does graffiti using stickers, so it's like it's still graffiti, but it's not that bad because you can peel it off easily. It's kind of the same vibe with Aaron finding a place that is abandoned and not in a public area, and it's just like an empty place that no one goes to, and it's like, oh, this is like an unused, like, abandoned area, old shut down subway or whatever it is. So I feel like that was a good way to show, like, so this is wrong, but it's not that bad. Because if he was like, "Hey, let's spray paint this like on Times Square, like in the middle of the street or whatever," then it's like, "Geez, man, we're really putting this kid in danger." But anyway, so yeah, he spray paints his latest like drawing idea on the wall, and you can see like a little bit more banter, and he gets to learn a little bit more about his father, and then his father used to be more free-spirited and would do like graffiti and would be more of a morally ambiguous young rebellious person, but then he became a cop and kind of straightened out and everything. So it was interesting for him to learn that there was a different side to his dad, which I think is relatable. Like, everybody kind of has like an idea of who their dad is, and then at some point there's like, oh wow, that dad was like that. I had no idea. Like, you see old pictures of them doing something that you wouldn't imagine them doing. You're like, oh my gosh, wow. So I feel like that. Okay, so yeah, he finishes his art, takes a picture, and he gets bit. And I like that he doesn't react to it. He's just like, "Oh, spider bit me," and flipped it off, because it's like, I mean, I don't know. How painful is a spider bite? I guess you don't... I never feel getting bit. An ant bite is painful because it's an immediate poison. But like mosquitoes, you don't feel the bite. You just feel it later, really. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about that. But I just thought it was funny. yeah, so he goes home, and then there's the transformation scene where, immediately the next day he's oh, I'm not recording this. Oh shoot. Oh well. Immediately the next day he's like taller, and he's like, oh shoot, am I? And I love the like frame of like becoming Spider-Man is like going through puberty, and just the awkwardness of that, and like the internal monologue and everything is it's really funny. And he's like sweating like crazily, and then he sees Gwen, and oh right, call back. So yeah, Aaron like gives him like flirting tips, the hey thing, with that, put your hand on their shoulder and everything. And so yeah, he sees Gwen, and then there's like an awkward back and forth, and he keeps on saying puberty, and she's like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. And he's like, huh? Oh, no, I already did. I'm a man now. And it's just a really funny moment. And then he tries to flirt, and then his hand sticks to her hair, and just yeah. And so it's just really funny that like he's not like becoming Spider-Man. I mean, I guess the same thing happens with Tobey Maguire, where like he's kind of going through Spider-Man changes at school, and but like I like how it's mixed with like in this film specifically, it's mixed with character interaction. Like these are two main characters, and they're still kind of getting to know each other, and he's not really representing himself normally because he's like becoming Spider-Man. He doesn't know what's happening. And the best line in this movie, in my opinion, that just sums up how Miles feels at this moment, when he's walking down the hallway and his internal monologue is so loud, and he's like looking around, everybody's staring at him, and he says, just for a brief second, he's just like, oh, am I a weird guy now? Like, I love that. That is that is like being 14 is that thought, in my opinion. Being a 14-year-old is that thought. Am I a weird guy now? So it's just really, really funny. And it's like a valid fear, because he's like an extrovert, he's very social, he has a lot of friends, and now he's like, oh, am I a weird guy now? Is this it for me? Have I just like it's so funny. Anyway, so let's see, where are we? What's happening next? Right, so chaos ensues, getting chased by a security guard, all that good stuff. Oh, right, a very important thing. So we went through all that entire scene with his dad driving him to school. And like you can tell, like, okay, there's some tension in this relationship here. There's things that aren't being said. And so you're like, all right, but you can tell that there's love there. There's but it's made 100% clear when he's like, when he leaves the school and gets on the subway, and he's like, I have to tell someone. And the first person he goes to call is his dad. So it's very clear, like there's, his dad is kind of micromanaging and demanding, but at the same time, he's the person that Miles trusts the most. Yeah, so his dad doesn't pick up, so he decides, oh, I gotta go to check out the spider and see what's going on. And so he looks at the spider, and he's like, oh, that's a normal spider. And then it starts glitching out, and he's like, oh, this is, what the heck? And then that's when he gets caught in the middle of a Spider-Man fight. And so this is another example of this film respecting and continuing. There's a phrase that I should probably explain so I can use it later, which is called betraying a character, and it's a writing phrase, I think, and it's where you want something to happen in the plot, so you just write it and have it happen, but you had a character do things that their their character would not allow. An example would be like you have a character who's a little old lady that's like 90 years old, and she has like a cane or whatever, and for some reason they need to break the characters in the story need to break through a wall. So the 90-year-old little old lady punches a hole through the wall and then gets to the other side. Where it's like, before that, there was no establishment that she had superpowers. So she was like walking around the crutches, and what? That's called betraying a character. You don't have characters do things that you haven't set up to be a part of their character. You need to write a new character or find a character that you've already written that would possibly do that. So anyway, that being said, this story does not betray Peter Parker's character. Peter Parker does everything Peter Parker would do. So he's fighting the Goblin, and I really like that they made the Green Goblin giant and all of the bad guys kind of massive, because it kind of makes Spider-Man look like a literal spider in comparison, and the bad guys are just like swatting at him like you would an insect, and it's just really cool. Something you can do with animation that doesn't play well in live action, I feel like. So anyway, Peter's fighting the Goblin, and he's 26. He's at the top of he's peaked in his career pretty much. He's really good at fighting, but he's not easily winning. He's kind of on his heels the whole time. It's very challenging, but he's extremely competent. And because he's 26, he became Spider-Man when he was like 14 or 15 or something like that. So yeah, he's very experienced and really good. And so Miles gets caught up in it, and immediately when that introduction, the first thing Peter says to Miles is, "Your shoes are untied." And he's like, "I know." And then there's like a funny jokey moment. It was like, "This is a onesie, so it's not really a problem for me." And I like that was pointed out, because like that visual, the whole show don't tell thing. Well, I guess they're showing and tell, but like they're using his decision not to tie his shoes as like an example of his immaturity. And so the first thing he sees is that, and then he realizes, "Hey, you're like me." And then he's just immediately, without questioning or further exploration, was like, "Hey, I'll help you." Because he knows, like, you're a young kid, like, you have superpowers, this is going to be tough for you, so I'm going to help you. And then the fight continues, and at some point, I don't remember the order of things, he gives Miles... Oh, no, yeah, right. He goes and does that really epic, like, backflip thing to... No, like the huge spinny move up to the top to plug in the Goober collider key MacGuffin thing. And the bad guys come back and fight him and stuff, and then he gets injured, and that's when he gives him the key and says, like, "Hey, why don't you... could you please get up there and deactivate this for me?" And he's like coughing, and it's just like not... He's like, "Oh wow, I'm actually really injured and I can't do this." And so I wanted to actually talk about... something that I feel might be a flaw in this film, um, which is the Kingpin comes in and they have a conversation about the machine, and they're kind of going back and forth. The Kingpin is funny and menacing, and his funniness does not make his menacingness doesn't reduce it, because sometimes people try to make a bad guy funny and then in the process makes them not scary anymore. So there's that problem doesn't exist here. So he's kind of jokey, but he's still terrifying. And so they go back and forth, and I feel like Peter Parker's choice of words was poorly chosen. He said something like I saw inside the machine, and I know what you're trying to do. It's not going to work. And it's just very blunt. And he's like, you're not gonna bring your family back. It's not going to work. I feel like he chose, and then Kingpin just gets angry and kills him on the spot with both fists. And I feel like there could have been, that was kind of not the most graceful way of saying that. He could have tried to use, anyway, I don't know. I just feel like it was a clumsy choice of words that led to his death. But anyway, very minor flaw. You kind of get the idea that this guy is kind of out of control and a crazy person. So maybe he would do that, however he said it. But just my take on it at this point. Anyway, where are we? So, okay. Now the Prowler. Miles makes a noise, and the Prowler, or Kingpin hears it and says another. He says a menacing thing in a menacing way, but it's funny. They're like, kill that guy. That was hilarious, but it was like, he wasn't joking, but it was funny for some reason. And so he does. He goes on the hunt, and the Prowler is just a monster. He's in the shadows. He's fast. He has claws. He's like a predator. It's terrifying. And another choice in this film that I think was excellent and sets it apart from other films in the Spider-Man films is the fact that he's still doesn't understand his new powers. He's still learning his powers, and he doesn't understand how to control them, and he's being attacked during that. And I think that's really good. The case being, he jumps and sticks to the ceiling, and then the Prowler's coming, and he's like, I can't unstick. That's terrifying. It's a superpower that potentially could get him killed because he doesn't know how to unstick. And so it just brings a lot of tension to the film, and I feel just a great idea. Peak writing right there. But eventually, Miles escapes, and yeah. Okay, so what's next? Let's see. I got some notes here. Right, Miles escapes and gets back to his home. He has two rooms. He has his dorm room, because the private school is kind of I forgot the term. Anyway, there's a school where in high school you live at the school. I don't remember I forgot what it's called. But yeah, he has a dorm room, and he has his room at home. And so he kind of climbs through the window. And there's kind of an odd moment. I don't know why they made this choice, but his dad breaks into the room and says, "Police, stop, put your hands up." But he busts into the room without his gun. And I don't know why. That goes against officers' training and instincts. I don't know why he wouldn't have charge into the room with his gun ready. And you could argue like, oh, maybe he wasn't close to his gun, but that's not the case. Like a police officer is trained to be like, a firearm is like, like an extension of them. So I don't understand. Maybe because it would have made the audience feel uncomfortable because it was his son, but like, I don't know. I feel like it was just a weird image to have him. He didn't even have his fists up. He just walked in and his arms at his side and he's like, please stop or put your hands up. And so I'm not saying he should be swinging his gun around pointing. He should have it like up or down. Like, anyway. So I thought that was weird, but that's a very minor weird thing that happened. And this scene is probably the biggest scene for the mom character, who I kind of use the Myers-Briggs personality test as kind of like a guide, a quick cheat sheet to explain a character. And it's 4 traits. Myers-Briggs personality test has 4 traits, and one of the traits is F and T, and it's kind of on a spectrum. So T is thinking and F is feeling, and it's kind of how an individual prioritizes his thought process. Do they go to is their first instinct to go to analytical logic or to feeling and compassion and empathy? And so obviously the dad is a T and the mom is an F. I think she's a nurse in this film. I'm not sure. But anyway, Miles says like, can I stay here tonight? And the dad's immediate response is like, hey, Miles, you made a commitment to that school. And a thing about thinking people is, since their first thought is thinking and logical, they kind of might be a little oblivious to someone's feelings if it's not outright crying, or so if it's a subtle emotion, they might not pick up on it. So he's like, hey, you made a commitment to that school, and then the mom says like, hey, he's scared or he's frightened or something. And the dad kind of looks at her and then looks at the son and kind of like, oh, I didn't notice that, and responds like, oh, of course you can stay here. And so it's like he is a feeling person, but the first impulse is for the like logic and thinking rather than feeling. Anyway, so I thought that was a great. The mom character really shined in that scene, and it was great. And then her later speech to Miles saying like, our family doesn't run from things, when Miles was asking if they could move from the city. And then Miles asks about his dad's opinion on Spider-Man. He's like, do you really hate Spider-Man, Dad? And he kind of is like, well, yeah, you know how I feel about vigilantes. And he kind of starts to go into his thoughts on it. And the mom's like, hey, now's not the time to be talking about this. And this was a really good moment, a really good place to put this, because it puts Miles in a place where it's like, okay, I'm a Spider-Man now. The first Spider-Man is now dead, and I have this responsibility I was given in this key, and so now I'm Spider-Man, and my dad doesn't like Spider-Man, so it's like, okay, I can't really go to my dad for that, and and so that's a really important tension in this film, and it makes sense why he doesn't go to his dad, because like, that's why in Disney films you'll often see the parent characters get killed off pretty soon or are already dead when the movie starts. And it's because like, if they were alive, the characters would say, or the audience might subconsciously being like, "Hey, go to your parents, kid. Like, what you're dealing with this crazy stuff. Go to your parents. Why are you?" So it's like it just makes you just remove that thought by making them dead. But the way you would do that, the smarter way to do that, I think this film pays off. Which is like, I love my dad, but my dad does not agree with my actions, so I can't go to him for support right now. And it doesn't matter that that's not true. That his dad would probably have a, kind of have a different approach to like his opinion on Spider-Man if he learns that his son has those superpowers. But all that matters is Miles believes that he can't. So, and that the audience believes that he believes he can't. Anyway, moving on. So the news breaks that Spider-Man dies, and first you see the parents' reaction, and like the dad's like covering his mouth, like he doesn't like the guy, doesn't agree with his choices, but it's like, geez. And then it goes into like who Spider-Man was, and so they're like, oh geez, this young guy has been Spider-Man since he was a kid. This is crazy. And then you see the city's reaction, and the way the city and the characters in this film mourn the loss of their Spider-Man is another way that this film does not betray Peter Parker. Yeah. So what happens next? Where does Miles go from here? Right. Okay. So Miles kind of goes to the speech that MJ is giving. She said something kind of poignant. I'm not going to be able to find it in my notes. If it comes back to me, it will come back to me. So Miles picks up a Spider-Man costume, and you get the Stan Lee cameo, which is always fun to see in the theaters. Yeah, anyway, so he picks that up, and there's kind of like a line that shows that he's kind of just like a scummy businessman, being like, where it says no returns, but it sounds like he's saying wisdom. It's like, oh, it always fits eventually, and then it pans over. That was really funny. Yeah, so he listens to the speech. Oh, right. So MJ says something about how like yes, he was bit by a spider, but it was also a choice to become Spider-Man. And because you could have done anything with those powers. You don't have to, like, that's a specific choice to use it for good. And so, and I feel like that's good because it shows a sense of agency. It's not the spider that made Spider-Man Spider-Man. It's Peter Parker's moral decision, and we all know his backstory and how he came to that decision. Yeah, so Miles is deciding to become Spider-Man, and the way he demonstrates that, a great way this film does show and tell. There's a whole scene where there's no dialogue; it's just visuals, and the way they show that is he gets inspiration from the comic books, and he looks up at this massive building, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna jump across this building like the comic book Spider-Man. So he runs up the building, and he looks down, and the music starts to rise, and you think he's gonna jump, and then it immediately cuts to him running down the hills, down the stairs. Like, no way, I'm not gonna do that. And he's at the bottom, and he's looking at the massive building, and then he looks over, and looks down and sees a significantly smaller building. He's like, yeah, that's the one I'll do. And what the film's saying with this is great, where it's like you choose, like, I'm gonna do the right thing, and but when you choose to do the right thing, you can't really, you have a desire to like kind of control the outcome. And so his choice to hedge his bets by jumping across a smaller building is it's just funny. It's really funny and shows his mindset and kind of immaturity at that time and his fear, and it's good. These are good things. You want a character to have growth, and you don't want him to be completely confident immediately. So yeah, he goes up at the top and he runs, and then boom, so much setup for this. He trips over his laces, which is so smart, so visual, great writing here, where his ego, it's his choice to be like, I'm gonna not have my laces tied because I think it looks cool. And then that he trips and falls down the building and smacks against things on his way down, and then he breaks the key that Spider-Man gave him, and it's like a visual way of him like almost feeling like he's breaking the commitment, and he feels really bad about that. Yeah, so it was just a great character moment. It was really funny, but this moment and this humor does not diminish his character. Like, yeah, we're kind of laughing with Miles. We're not laughing at him. Okay, so let's see. So from there, he goes to Peter's grave, and he apologizes for breaking the key, and he says like he wants to do this for you. He's like, I want to do this for you, but I want to do this for you, but I can't do this alone. And he says, a definitive, like, it's not, I don't feel like I can do it alone. It's like, I can't. He's, which is another, it's like manifesting negativity, and it just shows where his mind is at. And he's at a very low point. And then that's where he gets introduced to Peter B. Parker, and we all get introduced to Peter B. Parker. And his introduction, he's wearing a trench coat with the collar up, and his shadow looks exactly like the Prowler. The Prowler music comes in, and you're like, oh shoot, he's gonna get attacked. And then his instincts kicked in, and he turns around and zaps him, and he's like, oh, what did I just do? And then we see Peter B. Parker. It's Peter Parker. He's in his 40s, except for he has brown hair and brown eyes. It's like a different guy, with the same guy. And so we get his intro. And I feel like Peter B. Parker is the story that we should have got from Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Where it's the same setup, it's an older mentor. He's at a low point in his life, but it's still, the story still does not betray Peter B. Parker either. This iteration of him he's at a low point. He's been superheroing for a long time, but he's still it's still respectfully done. Like, yeah, and they're making jokes here and there about like, right, let me just talk about the circumstances. So he's married he's married to MJ. MJ wants to have kids, but he is afraid and doesn't want to. And so they split up, and he's like, oh, I broke her heart. And so now he's alone, and he's an older Spider-Man. He's been through hell and back, and he's feeling really down. And he's got like kind of a belly on him, and then he gets launched into Miles's universe at his low point, which I think is a very interesting place to have Peter. And so he comes into the universe, and Miles, comedically drags him with the web by accident to Uncle Aaron's house, who is the Prowler. And this is a great way to have the story for that reveal to remain a secret, because no one would assume that the Prowler is Uncle Aaron if, Miles is bringing Peter to his house. So he ties him up onto the punching bag, and they have a little back and forth, the humorous back and forth. He comments on it. He looks different and his shape different. He's like, I think you just called me fat. And he's like, and then he just makes an assumption of like, oh, I was going to get trained by this other Peter. Now you can train me. And this Peter is different because he's older, and it's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then teaches him his first lesson of, don't look at the face, look at the hands. And he reveals that he untied himself, and he kicks the bag at him and jumps out. And then they have their conversation, and Miles explains to him the severity of the situation and what he needs to get done, and brings up the key, the collider key, and Peter notices it's broken and is like, did you break this? And he's like, oh no, it broke. And it's a perfect tie to his fear of having kids. He's like talking to a 14-year-old, and the fact that Spider-Man would be afraid to have kids makes so much sense, because he became Spider-Man as a kid. So he was clearly traumatized, because he was like fighting adult bad guys as a kid, and now as his wife wants to have kids, and it's just like completely terrified. So he doesn't want to. He's like, kids are immature. They make stupid decisions. They accidentally break things. I'm not going to drag this kid into what I had to go through. Like, that's not responsible. I can't put him through what I went through. And I feel like that's very mature of him. And then, but Miles kind of, echoes the line, with great power comes great responsibility, and starts to guilt trip him. And Peter B. Parker's, he's still a hero, and he still wants to be a good person, but he just really doesn't want to. So you have that inner conflict, which was very comedically played. Right, the line he says is like, he's like, a lot of people are going to get hurt. A lot of people are going to die. Are you good with that, Spider-Man? And he's like, yeah. And then he like looks down, and he's like, oh, right. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm guilt tripping you. Is it working? And he's like, no, it's not working. It's not working. And then he looks down, and he's like, ah. And it's just like, it's just a battle with his conscience, which like, that is rich character work, rich storytelling. And yeah, it was just, this scene was so delightful to watch. Anyway, so he agrees to train him, and so he kind of gives him basic, he's like, all right, tell me some stuff, like teach me how to be Spider-Man. And then he just like gives him basic stuff about like how to clean your suit and how to keep it like from chafing and everything. and it's like really boring stuff. And he's like, oh, so to fix the key, we should go to the lab. He's like, oh, sweet, let's swing there. And he like laughs at at Miles's ignorance. And he's like, no, we're not going to swing all the way to a lab. We got to save our legs. And so he's like on the bus. And so, they're standing outside of the lab, and he goes into his thought of, what would I do if I were me? And it shows them both standing there in the same pose. And then really importantly, he's going to train him to be Spider-Man, but he's not going to put this kid in danger. So he's like, all right, what do I do? And he's like, so they go over the plan, and he says, what do I do? And he says, you're gonna stay here and be lookout, because he doesn't want to bring him. He doesn't want to put a child in danger. I'm emphasizing that a lot because I'm going to be talking about another film probably Saturday, and that will come up in that podcast. But anyway, so I do want to go back and talk about one line that was very preachy and not necessary, and took me out of the film, and it's just really lame. So Miles mentions something about like, oh, so and so is the head scientist, and then he's like, oh, I'll re-examine my bias because the head scientist is a woman. And it's like, it was just preachy and cringy, and it's like, okay, so his assumption was that the head scientist is a man. That was his assumption and his bias. But the thing is men are more interested in things, and women are more interested in people by and large. Just statistically, that's how it breaks down. And that doesn't mean that that there are no female head scientists and there are no male therapists. That's not the case at all. There are definitely people with those careers out there. So it's not a bias. It's not negative. It's an assumption that was statistically accurate, but specifically wrong. So who cares? Like, who cares? Like, I don't think he should be. And obviously, he's not like prejudiced about it. He's not like, harumph, it's a female scientist. He doesn't care. He's like, oh, cool, whatever. So it's like, why even bring this up? Like, why put that in there? And it's odd because after that, the story starts to suffer. Like there's it comes back, but there's a moment, there's like in the middle of film, there's a moment where some pretty detrimental things happen to this film, and it's kind of started around this time, which is kind of weird. Yeah, so they go in, or he goes in, Peter goes in alone, and Miles is sitting there doing watch out, kind of grumpy, annoyed that he doesn't have the 26-year-old mentor that was kind of like more enthusiastic and energetic about it. And he sees Kingpin come in with his henchmen, and he's like, oh snap, this is just got way more dangerous. And so he follows Peter in. And so he meets up with Peter in the ventilation system, and Peter's annoyed. He's like, why are you here? And I think that moment is really cute, because they're like in a very confined space, and he's like crawling around and like kind of crawling under his stomach and like pushing his arm away. It just is the vibe of I'm doing something, like as a father, I'm doing something, and my son wants to know what I'm doing. And so he just like crawls on top of me, like steps on my stomach, and I'm like, oh, and it just felt, it just feels like a curious toddler, like kind of like stepping on his parents. It was just, anyway, that's kind of an aside, but it was a charming moment in my opinion. Um, and he's like, "What are you doing here? I told you to stay back." And Miles is like, "Hey, I'm not gonna let another Spider-Man die again." And he's like, "I'm not doing that." And it's a great character moment for both of them, a great relationship moment. This is the first time that these characters, they're starting to like each other. They're starting to, and yeah, and so Peter kind of pauses and is like, "Wow, in my workplace," which is hilarious that Peter calls superheroing his workspace. It's just really funny. It's like, my workplace is in the workplace, usually I don't, people are trying to kill me, so you're a nice change of pace, kid. And so it's like, all right, they're starting to like each other. Their relationship is going in a positive direction. And so they break in, and then there's the whole fight scene with Doc Ock, which you don't realize that she's Doc Ock at first. So she comes in, and Peter Parker tries to like charm her because she doesn't know that she's kind of the big bad of the story. She's not just another henchman. She's kind of at the same level, partnering with Kingpin. And anyway, so that fight starts to happen, and the passwords going back and forth. Oh, I want to step back a little bit. So Peter starts to teach Miles some very useful stuff for him, which his fingers are sticking to the lights and he can't get off. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "Unstick." He's like, I don't know how to unstick." He's like, "Just be in the moment." He's like, "I am in the moment. It's a terrible moment." That was so funny. And anyway, he says, like, "Just relax." It's like, "How am I supposed to relax?" And he's like, "What do you do to relax?" And then he starts to sing, and they call back to the beginning, and it works, and he starts to chill and relax, and he starts kind of dancing a little bit, and his one by one his fingers start unsticking, and then he falls down, and then that alerts Doc Ock. So she comes in, and or Liv, which is funny. So she comes in and starts interacting with Peter Parker, and Peter Parker kind of realizes, like, oh, he doesn't realize it. He just gets flicked with a finger into a seat that locks, and is like, oh, this is not just a scientist. This is a bad guy who has superpowers, and this isn't good. And she has really cool iteration of Doc Ock's arms, which are kind of balloon-like, kind of octopus fleshy. It's very interesting. It's like almost like there's fluid inside this kind of balloon or bag, and the fluid is like moving. It's just really cool art style. And a good way to use a alternate universe is like, let's show the same technology but a little bit different. So let's go into the fight. Okay, so they fight, and Peter Parker is on his heels. He's caught off guard and is he's narrating the fight, which is, he's not freaking out. He's not like, I'm gonna lose, but like, he's narrating the fight, and he says, "This is the moment where I'm losing the fight." So he's like, it shows his experience that he's fought so many times. Like, this is the low point of the fight, and he's narrating it, which is so Peter Parker, and it's really funny. Meanwhile, Miles is invisible, which he, yeah, it was instinctual. It was kind of a fight or flight response. He becomes invisible, which I kind of don't like that Miles has extra powers. It's kind of weird, but it kind of makes him a different character, though. He's a different superhero. Like, I could even think that he could have like a different name, like a Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and he could have like even a different Spider-Man name too, because Miles Morales is his own character. He's so original. Like, he's not just another person taking up the mantle of Spider-Man. He's his own character. He's on a league of his own. So yeah. Anyway, so Peter's losing the fight, or is like on his heels, and kind of changes from the all right, I'm fighting, to all right, let's escape. Let's grab the computer and escape. So he just, and in that moment, that shows Peter's intelligence, and that he's really smart. He grabs the monitor. He's like, the good news is we don't need the monitor, and he throws the monitor. And I don't know why, but I just love the line when Doc Ock says, "Can I have that? That's proprietary." Like I don't know what it is. It's just, it made me laugh. I don't really have a comment on it, but I just love that she said that. Yeah, so they escape, and yet again, Miles is not being trained in like a training room and just chilling. Miles is being trained while they're being chased and attacked. It's like, okay, it's practical for you to know how to swing because we need to get the heck out of here. So let's teach you how to swing right now. And so he gives them one, what's it called? The moment he opens the door, there's a bunch of scientists, and he's like, now would be a great time for you to turn invisible. He's like, yeah, I know. It's like, okay, not turning invisible, selecting a bagel. And then, Miles hits a guy with a bagel, which is going to be an interesting callback for the sequel. Anyway, so they're escaping. Peter's being like, stop running, try to swing, and is like kind of like giving him the basics, and then is like, and most importantly, stop listening to me, like use your instincts. And he's like, that's the best idea you've had all day. And so they kind of start, and Doc Ock is on their heels and has like a chainsaw attachment to one of the arms, and is just really, it's a close chase. And so Miles eventually gets the hang of it and starts swinging, and that's a really great moment where Peter, right, Miles says, "You're amazing, man," and it's, Amazing Spider-Man, and then Peter's like, he's like, "You're amazing." He's like, "Look at us. You're the mentor who's good, but not as good as me." And he's like, "And we're both doing it." And he's like, "I'm proud of us, man." And I know I botched that line, but it's just a great moment. It's just like a mentor-mentee relationship that we did not get with Ray and Luke. This is what the fans wanted. Don't subvert our expectations. Give us what we want. Oh my gosh. Anyway, yeah. And also, that's the thing. This film does subvert your expectations. Like, Peter's not what you would expect him to be, but it makes sense and does not contradict anything about his character. So anyway, so they're swinging away, and Doc Ock is getting really close, and then they get webbed up, which is really weird. Out of nowhere, they they kind of wait. Oh right, I think that their webs get snipped and they start to fall, and then they get webbed up. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And and then here comes the introduction to Spider-Gwen, which is one of the biggest issues with this film is the scene right here. So they get webbed up, which is kind of weird because there's 3 Spider-Men and a third Spider-Man comes in and ties up the heroes. I'm guessing for suspense reasons, but just on a practical level, if you're trying to defeat this bad guy, why would you tie up 2 other good guys that are not injured or anything? They're not doing anything wrong. And so anyway, Gwen, oh right, the computer is taken away from them and Doc Ock has it now. And then Gwen effortlessly defeats Doc Ock and takes the computer, which is a massive problem with this film because one, Peter B. Parker, the fight with Peter B. Parker and Doc Ock was establishing that that Doc Ock is a formidable villain. She's very, very skilled at fighting. And so it's like, okay, this character, and what that does for the film and for the characters and for the audience is it creates great tension and suspense. Every time this character is on screen, you are afraid for the heroes. You're like, oh geez, this character is very good. A very good fighter and is a threat, a massive threat. So to have Gwen Stacy or Spider-Gwen spin onto the scene or swing onto the scene and defeat her easily, that undoes what the previous scene does. It just Uno reverse card. Nope, she's not a hard character to defeat. She's easy. She's an easy character to defeat. So yeah, that's a huge problem. Massive problem for the film. Ruins the tension. And so then it goes into the backstory of Gwen. Pretty interesting backstory. Gwen gets bit by the spider. Peter's her best friend. She loses Peter, so now she feels like making friends and having friends is morally like not the right thing to do if you're a spider person, because you could, hurt your friend. So it's best not to make friends. So she's morally a good person. Seems like obviously she's very competent. She's been Spider-Man for a few years, so she knows the ropes. Because she's even better than Peter B. Parker. Yeah, anyway. So this leads to another scene, which is another downfall for this film. A dagger in its back, kind of, where it shows Peter's asleep in the back of the bus and they're going home or they're traveling somewhere, and Miles tells Gwen that Peter broke the key. And it's kind of like a funny moment, but this is the problem, and this is a massive problem with current films these days, is people making a joke, which is funny for the sake of the audience, but in the stakes of the film, it kind of ruins something. In this case, it's great that Miles is a flawed character and does graffiti and is like rebellious. That's great. That's awesome. And also he's clumsy, and yeah, it's great. But I don't think that they established Miles as the type of person that would break something by accident, but he broke it and then blame it on someone else, like blame it on someone else that you're close to. Like that is, I think that's betraying his character. I don't think that's something that Miles would do. And so they kind of just laugh it off, and then they have a conversation about maybe becoming friends. And there's a hint of a bit of a romance, which I'm all for. I feel like modern films nowadays, they're really, they really don't really want to tell love stories. And I'm not like, oh, I'm a huge fan of love stories, but I haven't seen a good one in years. So it's like, it's all right to have a love story B plot or something. Like, come on. Can't we have a little bit of romance in the world? Anyway. So they hint at a potential, like, they like each other, and it might be a romance thing. But obviously she's like she's afraid of getting someone hurt. But I mean, if it's a spider person, then they're probably gonna be in danger anyway, so you might as well be friends, and maybe more. So anyway, that's just my logic going into it. So they talk about that, and then they cut back to Peter, and he's awake listening to the conversation. And I rewound it immediately with being like, is there a moment that he wakes up? Like, is there a moment indicating like, oh, he's wrestling in the background, he's starting to wake up? Or did he hear Miles say, Peter broke this? Did he hear that? Because I'm not sure. Like, if you watch the scene, you're like, wait, he's awake? He heard him, like, falsely accuse Peter? Like, that's... Anyway, I don't know. That was a weird scene, clumsy, needed a rewrite to tighten that up. Don't tell a joke if it's gonna make your character look like a jerk. If Miles isn't a jerk, that's not his character. He's friendly. He's nice. He says you're a different shape to Peter. And he's like, why do you have brown hair? Why do you look different? Why are you a different shape? He doesn't say, why are you fat? Like, that's the polite way of saying, like, your body looks different. Like, he's not mean. He's not a mean guy. He's nice. Miles is nice. Anyway, so let's go into the next scene, which they go to Aunt May's house, which is a logical decision. And this scene has like a lot of emotional. It's going to be an emotional scene because Aunt May is going to see Peter as a 40-year-old, and Peter just died yesterday and he was 26. Like, that's gotta do a number on Aunt May. Like, that's not... She's gonna react in a way. And so, and also for Peter, I think that Peter buried Aunt May, or Peter's Aunt May died too. So it's like, I haven't seen my aunt in a while. Basically his mom. And so it's like, it's an emotional scene, and I think this was a very inappropriate scene to be telling jokes in, because they ring the doorbell, Aunt May comes out with a baseball bat being like, get out of here, or nice to visit, and then sees Peter and is like, oh my gosh, it's Peter. And so she comes out, and it kind of starts to hint at that emotional scene where it's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, what? Oh my gosh, you're older, which is not an insult. It's like she's seeing how her son would have, or how her nephew would have been if he didn't die. And so he's like, whoa, you're older. And then she immediately was like, and fatter. And is that sweatpants? And then it cuts to Gwen Stacy, and Gwen says, yeah, that's what those are. It's not funny. It, it's not a place to put a joke, writers. This is her okay, basically her son died, right? Like she's raised this kid. It's her adopted son basically. And he died yesterday. That's not when you go, "Oh, LOL, you're fat now." No. It's out of place. It's wrong and stupid and not funny and ruins the emotional value of this scene. So they completely ruined the scene. I didn't really notice this at first when I first watched it. I think I just laughed at the joke because, it was the animation was funny and the delivery was humorous, but freaking wrong. Wrong. Stop doing this, writers. Stop doing this. Tell a joke when it's appropriate to tell a joke. Okay? Stop undercutting a dramatic scene with a joke. Have a dramatic scene happen and then cut to a humorous scene if you want to. Don't mix them together. Jeez. I know that some people feel uncomfortable about don't try to cater to people that are like, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable about drama. I don't want to watch this dramatic scene." It's a dramatic scene. Sit through it. It'll get funny later. Don't try to be like, "Oh, let's make everybody feel comfortable." Anyway, it's just a frustrating thing. It actually started with Guardians of the Galaxy, which worked really well in the first one. It was kind of annoying to see it in the second one, and now it's just every single film, every superhero film since then has done that. Comedies don't do that. Like if you straight up watch The Office, if there's a dramatic scene, do you think people are joking during that scene? I mean, someone could pull up a scene where that happens, but like not typically. If there's something poignant happening between like Jim and Pam, or even like Dwight and Jim, like it's serious, Like there's scenes where characters cry and it just holds on it, and that's in a comedy. So, geez, come on, guys. Anyway, let's see, where are we at? So at this point, I was like, that's when I realized that I couldn't make the video about Across the Spider-Verse. I needed to make this video. I needed to make this video because there's too much to say about it. I wasn't aware of these problems when I first watched it, but I just wanted to point this out. This doesn't make this movie a bad film. For me, it turned this great film into a good film. It did knock it down from the number one Spider-Man film, in my opinion, down to like my number two favorite Spider-Man film. Okay, so moving on. And there's some more problems when it comes to comedy ruining drama and characters. Ruining? Did I say ruining? Ruining. Anyway, my brain kind of had a hiccup there. So let's move on to Aunt May takes the spider people to, the kind of bat cave, the Spider-Man bat cave. And Peter B. Parker kind of expresses like, "Oh yeah, it's a shed where you keep your stuff. That's fine. Like I got the same thing." And then it's revealed that this Spider-Man was like, was able to be financially successful, or had a friend that was helping him. And so he had like this very lavish bat cave almost. And Spider-Man is kind of jealous and he's looking at it. And it's a funny idea that he would be jealous. And I'm okay with him making jokes about that. But like, there's a point where he says like, "I actually feel sad for this guy. This guy is pretentious. He died yesterday, and his aunt is standing right there. This is not a funny joke. This is something that a good person would never say near, like, okay, have the people who, sometimes it feels like people that write films have never experienced someone close to them dying. Like, and it's like dying is like a fictional, like, thing that they only really imagine in what's it called? Yeah, it's a phenomenon that is not experienced, but anyway, it's just like someone who has lost someone close to them would never write a scene like this. This is too inappropriate. This is ridiculous. So anyway, it's like, oh, you're mad about jokes? And it's like, dude, you can make a joke, but like comedians tour with jokes and they write jokes and they tell jokes and they go to different clubs and they figure out how to make a joke funny. And so if this joke was told by a comedian, and also it's not just a stand-up joke. It's not like stand-up comedy joke, because you can joke about death. You can totally joke about death in stand-up and it'd be funny. But this is a story. Like, this is a story with characters that you're joking about a circumstance that all the other characters around you. Anyway, it's just not appropriate. Like, everybody that was, like, he should say that, and Miles will turn around, who witnessed the death. That's another part. I didn't even think about that. Miles should whip around and be like, hey, I saw that guy die, and he was a nice person. And then Aunt May should be just crying, and Gwen should just be, like, staring at him disgustedly. Like, why would you say that, dude? Read the room. Anyway, so I've had enough of that. Let's move on. Let's see. But yeah, don't call a dead person pretentious and that you feel bad for them. That's not funny. So what do they do from the, oh yeah, and this is where I guess this is the supporting characters come in, which these characters are not the main characters. They're kind of background characters, and it's kind of just to flesh out the idea of alternate universes, to be like, oh cool, look how many different types of spider people there are. It's interesting, and they hint to a fully developed character, but they don't go into it. Like, all these characters behave, and they give a hint that they have a deep, rich backstory, but this specific story doesn't have time to go into it. Which I think was smart, because they gotta establish Gwen, Peter, two versions of Peter, and Miles Morales. So I think they allocated their time to character development appropriately. So they introduced those characters. One thing I will say about them that was kind of like a shortcut to show that they're, good guys, is someone says, my favorite of them is the Spider Noir character, the black and white one, played by Nick Cage. That was the best version, and I would like to see more of him because he's hilarious and interesting. But I think that character says, like, someone is going to have to stay behind, which means death, right? Someone's going to have to sacrifice their life. And all of the spider people simultaneously say, I'll do it. So it's just like a shortcut showing, yeah, these are all good spider people, all moral heroes. So that's all I have to say about the three of them. Let's see. Where do they go next? Oh, right. They talk about, and then Miles says, like, I'm actually from this universe, so no one has to sacrifice their life. And Peter's like in his corner and he's like, yeah, man, check out what he can do. He can, and he's kind of realizing as the scene progresses, he's like, look, you can turn invisible. Like, that'll be helpful. Do it. And he's like, I can't do it on command. He's like, oh, well, you can't do it on command, but he can do this other thing. He can do this zappy thing. Do it. And he's like, I can't do it on command. And he's like, he also can't do it on command. And as he's saying that, you can tell he's realizing, like, oh, shoot, like this kid became Spider-Man today. Wait. Became Spider-Man. No, 2 days. Yesterday, I think, because he fell asleep and woke. This is his first full day of being Spider-Man because he was bit last night. So Peter, so Gwen is like, I don't think he's experienced, and the spider people start to test him, and they throw different things at him, and they ask him questions like, can you do this? Can you do that? And he looks like he's falling short, and they agree, like, they kind of have a huddle without him, and they're like, yeah, you like, I don't think this kid's not prepared, like, he's not ready. He's too novice to be able to go on this mission. And so he turns invisible and leaves, which kind of hints at that I think some of his superpowers are connected to his emotional state, because he did the fight or flight thing and he turned invisible, and he when he felt sad he turned invisible. So I think it has something to do with that. That's not never stated, but that's what an impression I get from that. So yeah, he leaves and he goes to his Uncle Aaron, and it shows his parents. Oh, I think he listens to a message from his dad, who's very stern in the message, being like, I don't know where you're up to, I don't know what you're doing, but like, come home. And they're worried, and he's kind of hinting that he thinks he might be doing something wrong. And so that, even that plus what the dad was saying before of his opinions about Spider-Man, he doesn't feel like he can trust his parents. And so he goes to his Uncle Aaron, and or goes to his Uncle Aaron's place and starts writing him a note. And that's when the Prowler comes back, and at first he thinks it's Uncle Aaron, and then he realizes, he sees the full silhouette, and he realizes, oh no, that's the Prowler. And so he turns invisible, and the Prowler comes in and is like leaving a message to Kingpin, and he's like, I never give up. And he pulls off his mask because he's in his house, and Miles is invisible, and he's face to face with his uncle, and he realizes, like, I can't go to my parents because my dad doesn't agree with Spider-Man, and then now I can't even go to my uncle because he's the guy trying to kill me. So this is the lowest low. This is going into the lowest point for Miles. And so he runs away, and there's a chase, and the Prowler tricks him into thinking that he escaped him, but he's really tracking him. So he goes back to the spider people at Aunt May's house, and he busts in and quickly goes over what just happened. And I think Noir Spider-Man was like, dang, this is a pretty intense backstory. And they're like, hey, shut up, that's rude. And so, and then one of the spider people, I don't remember who, was like, hey. Oh, right. And I forgot her name, but there's a spider person who's like an 8-year-old in a robot suit. She's like probably the most techie of them all, and so she fixed the key. So they have the new key that will work, and they're ready to go on the mission. And I think Peter... no, they haven't gotten there yet. So Miles comes in, and someone asks, hey, were you followed? And he's like, no, I don't think so. And then the henchman fight happens in Aunt May's living room to her dismay. Take it outside. So that happens, and the Prowler comes, and the Prowler is fighting Peter, and Miles is just looking on in horror, like seeing his uncle and his mentor fighting is just traumatizing and terrifying. And the key gets flung into the air. Oh, one thing I wanted to say that was really smart of Doc Ock, because she's the first person, she's not a henchman, that busts through the door, and she catches them by surprise because they hear people coming at the door, their spider signal is going off, and she rings the doorbell, which disarms them because it's like, oh, it's just somebody at the door, and then immediately bursts through the door and tries to snatch the key and simultaneously punch Peter. That gets deflected, and then the chaos ensues. And then even the henchmen that come in, they say to Miles, like, hey, that was sloppy. Like you let us right to you. That was so sloppy. And so and yeah, he's inexperienced. He didn't realize that he was still being followed, because he saw the Prowler's motorcycle get like flung into the air. So he's like, all right, he doesn't have his motorcycle, but he was being tracked. But anyway, so it's good stuff. Good stuff when it comes to novice mistakes that Miles would make. And so the fight goes on, and Peter Miles gets the key, Peter loses it, and the Prowler is now after him. And that is a very intense scene. He's like animalistic and is like grabs him by the neck, and like Miles is like, oh my, like he's like, I'm done, like this. He's gonna die any second. So he just manages, like, he can't even talk because his throat is being squeezed. So he's like barely even managing a whisper. And then it cuts to Kingpin, and Kingpin says, like, just take him out. He like, he's a Spider-Man that has too much information. So like, just take out the Spider person. And oh wait, no, that doesn't happen yet. Miles manages to pull off his mask, and like the Prowler, like, is just, his world comes crumbling down, because he was keeping, his job. He was saying that he was an engineer. Like he's like, oh yeah, I'm an engineer. He lied about what he actually does for a living, and he wanted Miles to look up to him, and he's just like, oh my gosh, I like my own nephew. And so it's one of those moments where the circumstances call for a character to turn on a dime from bad guy to good guy. It's a Luke Skywalker being zapped by the Emperor and Darth Vader throwing him down. Grabbing him and throwing him down the Death Star pit or whatever it is. It's that moment. It's or it's not that moment verbatim, but it's a situation similar to that. And Peter, or why did I say Peter? Yeah, so that's when the Kingpin is watching this, and is like, why is he just sitting there holding him by the neck? And then he's like, hey, take him out, like, shoot him. And he lets go of him, or lets go of his neck, and pulls the mask over his face, which is a visual, great way, show don't tell, visual way of saying, like, don't be like me, be a hero. Like you had the Spider-Man mask on, and I like continue in that direction, and pulls the mask over his face. And then he disobeyed Kingpin's orders, which is a no-no, and he gets killed for that, or shot for that, um, and Kingpin lines up his shot to shoot Miles too, and then Peter comes in and knocks the gun out of his hand and saves him, and it gives him a chance to run away. And so he runs away, and he's in an alleyway, and he's basically saying his last words to his Uncle Aaron, and his uncle is basically saying like I wanted you to look up to me, like you're the best of us, like just keep going in this direction. And then he passes away, and at that moment his dad is just right around the corner, and he comes in, he pulls his gun, and he's like, put your hands up. And then Miles turns invisible and escapes, which leads his dad to think that this new version of Spider-Man killed his brother. So yeah, tensions are building. The story is heading in a really, really good direction, and is recovering from the errors that it was making towards the middle of the film. So like at this point, I've completely forgot about him. But yeah, so it continues. Let's see. So after he kills him, or after he passes away, right, he goes back to his dorm room where he has the where the spider people all relate that they have all gone through very similar situations, which, you know, that's something that happens something that can happen when you are a hero fighting villains, is like psychopaths tend to hurt people so close to the people trying to stop them. And so yeah, that is talked about, and he's like, this is part of the job, this is why it sucks to be a hero. And then Peter also reveals that he's going to take his place, and Miles tells him, no, though, I have to do it. And then he reveals his motivation is the wrong motivation. He has to make Kingpin pay. And Peter immediately recognizes that his motivations are for revenge, and he's grieving. He's gone through recent trauma, and it's not the right time, and he's not experienced enough to be able to do this. So he demonstrates, like, look, you don't know how to control your powers. You can't turn invisible. You can't on command. You can't do this on the command. You're not ready for stuff like this. And so he ties him up and gags him, which is, character-wise, that's not necessary. It wasn't necessary for him to gag him. Oh, actually, no. He could be like, "Hey, help! Someone untie me!" and escape. So you know what? That's a good thing to do. So he gags him, but he also left him in the room with his friend that was unconscious due to shock of seeing the spider people. So yeah, that could be tightened up a little bit more. But like the main reason why he's gagged is because his dad comes and sees his shadow, knows that he's in the room, and you know, doesn't want to tell him through the door that he lost his uncle, but he kind of says, like, he's like, I really care about our relationship, and people drift apart, and I don't want that to happen to us. And he's just good dad at a low point, being a really good dad. being more sensitive. So yeah, great scene, but he can't reply because he's gagged, but his dad thinks that he's angry or sad or something, so he leaves him alone. He's like, he needs his space, which is also a good dad. So from there, that interaction, or that hearing that monologue from his dad motivates him, and he's able to escape his motivates him and orients him. I think changes his motivation. Like, it's less about making Kingpin pay and more about saving his friends and not losing Peter. Because, yeah, so that's not said, but like, it's definitely, yeah, it's definitely felt. So he escapes his binds, but he unties himself by using his electric powers and escapes, and immediately goes to Aunt May, who is sitting there with tea and is like, I knew you were coming. And in this iteration of Aunt May, she's kind of a bit of a butler, Batman's butler. I forgot his name. Anyway, the butler. She's more involved in Spider-Man's career, so she's prepared and has a suit ready for him, and has web slingers resized to fit him perfectly. Or maybe it's just Peter's older web slingers when he was a teenager, and it just happens to fit perfectly. And so he gets spray paint and puts his little take. And this is why he's a different character. He's a different hero. Is like, even like, he customizes his suit, and it's like he deserves his own. It's not, we shouldn't be saying like, oh, and he's like, oh, I love Spider-Man, the Miles Morales one. He should have, like, we should know it's Miles Morales by the hero name as well. Like, he looks, his suit looks different, and like, when he wears his suit, like when he wears his Spider-Man suit and puts his hoodie on and his jacket on and his shorts and his Nike shoes, that looks so freaking cool. Like that, I was so disappointed when he took all that stuff off, when it was just the Spider-Man suit. I was like, no, put it back on. That was so sick. Like, anyway, I just thought it was the coolest thing. So he goes to the building that he jumped off, or attempted to jump off before, and he does the leap of faith thing, because Peter told him before he used the term, like, you'll know you're ready when you because it's a leap of faith, when you're ready to take that leap of faith. So he jumps, and it's in the same area where he did the first jump. I think it's the tallest building that he first attempted to jump off of, because he goes down. He goes soaring down, and then he shoots his webs, and he goes swinging, and the exact same obstacles that he hit on the way down when he first attempted it, when he was afraid, and are the same obstacles that he uses to propel himself up. And he goes, woohoo! And the letters follow him up, where in that first scene, he falls and he screams and he goes, ah! And the letters fall down. So yeah, I think there's like a flagpole and then the wall and everything. And he jumps off of the same stuff. So the animation is great, and it's a great callback, and it's something that maybe the audience wouldn't pick up on when they first watch it, but they feel it. They really feel it. Like, the setup and payoff for that is incredible. So he yeah, the spider people are, he's prepared to fight, he's ready. Um, and the spider people are at the building where there's a banquet where they're celebrating Spider-Man. Ironically, Kingpin's identity is a secret, and so he's like talking about how great Spider-Man was when he killed him. So it's yeah, just showing, it's pushing even further how evil this guy is. That he uses the death of someone to propel his own agenda, and when he was the one that killed him, it's just like just the worst, unethical psychopath villain characters. Um, so they're able to get through that by because the waiters were all dressed as spider people, which is great. And there was a scene that was very poignant, and I realized that there is a missed opportunity as well. And the scene pointed it out to me, where Peter B. Parker sees MJ and was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is hard to see her, like a young MJ, like." And it's like and all of his feelings of like, oh, I let her down, like, um, and so she comes up to him and is like, hey, can I get more bread? Thinking that it's um, thinking that he's a waiter. Can I get more bread? And then the bread, it kind of becomes an analogy for like her desire to have kids, and he's like, I'll give you as much bread as you want. Like, I just want to fill this room full of bread. And it's just like, it's just a really hilarious moment. And then Gwen Stacy uh Gwen Stacy is like, hey Peter, stop, I've been there, stop, let's go, let's get out of here. And when she said I've been there, it's like, whoa, we just missed a scene. I just realized that Gwen Stacy lost Peter, like couldn't save Peter in her universe. Now she's in this universe. She saw another Peter die again. Why wasn't she there? She was here. Her intro said I was launched into last week, literally. So, which isn't explained why her specifically was launched into last week and everybody else came as soon as the explosion happened at the collider. So that's not really explained, but it, like, why wasn't she there? Like, why did I mean, I understand that they wanted that to be, that's in the middle of Miles' origin story, but they could have had a flashback of her showing up and witnessing that death, or her like trying to get there but she couldn't make it on time and having to experience Peter's death again, and then being close up to like a 40-year-old Peter. It's like the same thing that we should have got with Aunt May with Peter B. Parker. Is this would have been a moment where it's like I've seen you die so many times, and so uh there's so much there. There's so much there. Maybe there's just not enough time for it, but like there's so much there that could have happened between Gwen and Peter. Yeah. Anyway, so they focused more on Miles and Gwen's relationship, where they should have spent a little bit of time on Peter B. Parker and Gwen to see because again, it's the same situation. Seeing a 40-year-old version of Peter, it's like you would have grown up to be that guy. Like, but I never, and I'm seeing it, but I would have never gotten to experience it. So anyway, and I'm not saying, nah, never mind. Let's see. So where are we? Yeah, so okay, so they get to the collider, and then they're all glitching out, so they're not as efficient as they should be, and the henchmen are kind of kicking their butts, and Peter's being attacked by Doc Ock, which this whole end fight would have been like a million times more terrifying if, or tension filled, if Gwen didn't defeat Doc Ock the first time she saw her. This is kind of a Star Wars trilogy issue where Rey beats Kylo in the first film, Rey beats Kylo in the second film, Rey beats Kylo in the third film. I am so terrified of Kylo Ren. He is so terrifying. Now let's look at Luke. Luke's mentor died by the big bad villain in the first episode. The second episode, Luke Skywalker gets his hand cut off, and it gets revealed that the villain is his father. So physically traumatizing and emotionally traumatizing. And then in the third film, he finally beats him through through rage, and pulls back and decides not to defeat his father. And at that point, uses his morals, like his trying to appeal to the good in his father, and he succeeds that way. Like that's the awesomeness of Luke. Like he doesn't even beat Vader, he changes Vader, which is great. Anyway, so it's kind of a situation like that. You shouldn't have had her beat Doc Ock. I mean, in her flashback when she was talking about her origin story, there's a little hint of her fighting Doc Ock in her universe. So maybe she's just really experienced in fighting Doc Ock, but that wasn't, I'm kind of doing some writing for them. That's not, what's it called? Explicitly shown. But yeah, so it just kind of ruins the tension there. But Peter is fighting her, and there is tension there because Peter has a hard time fighting this villain, and then that's where Miles comes in, and there's a great payoff to their relationship and both of their stories, especially Peter B. Parker, where he's like, "Hey, you did it! You turned invisible on command! Like, I love you, and I'm so proud of you, and do I want kids?" Like, he's just like realized, like, there's a part of me that does want kids, and if like I saw this young kid basically mature in front of my very eyes, and this was one of the most rewarding experiences he's had in a while, and he's just like, "Oh, I want kids. Whoa." And it's one of like a turn on a dime character change that tends to happen sometimes. Characters' opinions can change fast, very quickly, in a logical way, and this is one of those ways. Yeah, so that's a great moment, great payoff, and so the fight continues, and they're playing off of each other, and they're like really efficient, and there's a moment where the Doc Ock knocks Gwen unconscious, and she starts falling into the abyss, which is a big disappointment because she kicked Doc Ock's butt the first time she saw her, and then so it's more of like a character arc for Doc Ock, coming up against this hero that's hard to defeat and then beating her. Like, so it would have been a sweeter thing where she struggled to barely escape Doc Ock, making her more of a terrifying villain, and then the second time she meets up with her, have the Luke Skywalker cutting off the hand cut off moment, in that she gets knocked unconscious and falls into the abyss, and then Miles jumps to save her, And there's that cute moment where she like regains consciousness and says like, "Hey, Miles, I like your suit." And Miles makes a mistake and says, "Thanks, I made it myself," which is really annoying. I wish the line was like, "Thanks, I added my very own customizations," which is more accurate because that's Peter Parker's suit, dude. You added aesthetic like modifications. You just spray painted someone else's suit. So that was just annoying. But still a good moment. So together as a team, they all defeat Doc Ock, and it looks like it's going to be this big fight, but then like a bus flies and smacks her, which that was less satisfying. Could have ended better. And so after that, it's all of the characters just start one by one being sent into their own dimensions, and then Kingpin shows up, and Peter has, his protective instinct kicks in. He's like, "I'm not going. I'm going to protect you from this guy." And Miles is like, "Hey, no, I'm good. I got him. You don't need to like throw your life away to protect me. I can protect myself." And then he demonstrates that by tripping him, doing the same move that he did on him. Oh, let me do a callback. A little further in the fight, Miles jumps off of an object and does the exact same swing move that the original Peter Parker did to get to the top where the key goes. And he was kind of like, in that moment in the beginning of the film, he was like, "Whoa," and was observing that. And so Gwen says to Peter, like, "Oh, I didn't teach him that." And then he's like, "And you definitely didn't teach him that." And I don't know why the definitely was necessary. Kind of rude. But it's acknowledging that like Miles was even paying attention and learning with the original Peter, paying respect to the original Peter in this film. So yeah, that was a good moment. I'm sorry I didn't say that the right timing, but anyway, so a repeated thing. Miles does the same sweep the leg move on Peter that Peter did to him, and earlier in the film when he was testing him, saying like turn invisible on command, zap on command, and he couldn't. So he uses that move, and then he's like, "Hey," and he's gives him words of wisdom, and he's like, it's a leap of faith when it comes to talking about the relationship with his MJ, and he's like, "Right," and then he lets go and he falls back, and then the fight with Kingpin happens, and Miles is kind of on his heels, and it's not an even fight. Like, Kingpin is more experienced, and it's pretty sketchy. But there's a moment where Kingpin has him by the throat, just like the... I never went over Kingpin's origin, his motivation. He lost his family because his family saw him... fighting Spiderman, so they realized like, oh, Kingpin is a bad person, so they fled and got in a car accident in the process. So the whole point of this dimensional hopping thing is Kingpin's trying to bring back a version of his family. So he has Miles by the neck, just like he did with Peter, and he flies into like they're in like a train for some reason, and the train goes into like this dimensional thing where they were messing with his family's DNA. And I'm pretty sure, I didn't notice this before, but I'm pretty sure that every version of his family witnessed him fighting Miles Morales, and they all freak out and run away. So it's like he has no hope. Like, even if he could pull out his family from another universe, they all have a low opinion of him. So this intensifies his anger, and he does the same move that killed Spider-Man in the first movie, in the first fight with him, or it wasn't really a fight. And I was like, oh, wait, why didn't Miles die if it's the same attack move? And then I realized that he just did it with one hand. Like with Peter Parker, he, with both fists, beats him on the chest, like bursting his heart or whatever and killing him. But he does the same move, but one-handed for Miles. So it was, intense, but not a finishing move. And Miles's dad is witnessing this and sees Peter Spider-Man down. He doesn't know it's his son yet, but he's like, get up, Spider-Man. And he hears him, and he gets up, and I think Kingpin says something about like, I'm gonna take your family away from you. And he said, you're wrong. My family's always with me. And then he's like, have you heard of the shoulder touch? And then touches his shoulder and zaps him. And he goes flying. But he doesn't kill him. He just captures him, showing that it wasn't about revenge. It was about, stopping him from hurting more people. So it was great. And it was a good, and that's pretty much the movie's over from there. He has a great conversation with his dad over the phone, and his dad, there's a payoff of the graffiti / supporting his art skill, and he says like, hey, let's I would love to have some of your art. We can buy a wall privately owned. So he's still like, don't do illegal things, but I want to support you. So it's like a very nice gesture. He's like, we can throw up your art on a wall that's privately owned. So and then he like exits that phone call and introduces himself to his dad as Spider-Man, and he's like, you did great work today. And he's like, oh wow, hey Spider-Man, yeah, you too, but I don't agree with your methods. So he still has his like his opinions about what's it called, vigilantism. I don't know how to I don't know. So yeah, that's the ending of the film, and he shows his dad that he captured the Kingpin, and as Spider-Man. So he shows the police officer, and then he kind of just swings around and introduces himself to the city, and he's like, hey, I'm the new Spider-Man. And the city's like very accepting of him, and you can see how he's like loving it because he's an extrovert, and he goes to show off, and then he like slips and falls, and then like regains his balance, and that's just perfect. That it shows that he's still learning, and there's still growth for this character. And so then he goes on, and he enjoys himself swinging through the city, and there's a narration that ends, and he says something like, anyone could wear the mask, even you could wear the mask, which I'm not a huge fan of that idea. I'm not sure what is meant by that. I think there's in Ratatouille, there's a line that says like, not everybody could be a great cook, but a great cook could come from anywhere. I like that sentiment better because like heroes are rare. Like it is hard to sacrifice your own life for the good of humanity. Like people that make the conscious decision to run into burning buildings, that's not That's not a common. I just don't think the heroes are very common. Um, so anyway, but yeah, then it hints to the sequel by showing Gwen opening a portal and being like, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" And then the film ends. So those are my thoughts on the Into the Spider-Verse film, and I think that it's a good film. It has, when it comes to developing Miles Morales as a character, it is a great film. When it comes to plot, it's pretty good. When it comes to not portraying any characters, it is good and shaky in some areas, bad in some areas, but it's such a small proportion of the film that it's not that bad. It's just like two small scenes where, and it probably was just a mistake where the writers were like, oh, this would be funny, and not realizing what they were doing. But yeah, but I think this is a great. There's this phenomenon in films nowadays which it's really bothersome, and I'll go into it in my next episode. But because the next episode I'm going to be talking about the sequels, but the sequel to this, which is Across the Spider-Verse. But in this film, they did a wonderful job with the characters, and I think there's a tendency nowadays that there's a replacement idea rather than an additive idea. It's like a subtraction. It's like that you can't have two good characters in a movie. There can only be one. And so, like, I've experienced this phenomenon as a teenager. I was reading the Twilight books because I was trying to get closer to the girls in high school, but it turns out that that you don't have to have their same exact interests. Like my wife right now doesn't even like Star Wars, like it, and I don't like movies she likes, so you don't have to have the same exact taste in entertainment to be able to connect with people. But anyway, so I was reading those books, and I was a fan of Jacob. I think his name is Jacob. Yeah, Jacob. I was a fan of Jacob in like the second book. I was like, I like this guy. I actually like this guy better than Edward. Like Edward's kind of a weirdo freak. I don't like him at all. And at some point, he like completely abandons the main character, and then I was reading, and then all of a sudden, like on a dime, Jacob was behaving like a massive jerk. And I realized that the writer likes Edward more, but she made a mistake by writing this love triangle and like making this character Jacob like a really good guy and so much better guy than Edward. Like Edward's a jerk, and and I think she realized that, so she just started writing him as a jerk. Just write it like, yeah, Jacob's a jerk, and he starts doing this and being mean and being rude, and it's like, oh, you're diminishing this character to build up your other character you like more. And that happens all the time in movies. Like, oh, Rey is our new hero of Star Wars. Oh, this film's gonna have Luke in it. He's a loser. He's a freaking loser by comparison. Like Rey more, everybody. Look how losery Luke is. That doesn't have to. It doesn't. If you want the audience to like a character, that doesn't mean you have to make another character suck by comparison. That's not. And this film is the glowing example. Miles is an incredible character. Amazing. Is Peter worse because of it? No, Peter's better because of it. Peter's a better character because now there's This is what you have now. Now you have Miles, who's a great character, Peter Parker, who's a great character. And since they're both great characters that have a lot of great writing to develop them, you also have the friendship between and mentorship between Miles and Peter. That's what we could have had with Rey and Luke Skywalker. That's what we could have had. We could have had Luke still be a Jedi Master, a older Jedi Master, a flawed Jedi Master for sure, and Rey being a kick-butt new Jedi. Like, we could have had it both. We could have had it both. But there's this idea, modern writers, they're like, there's only so many pieces of a pie. Like, we have a pizza that only has like 10 slices, so that's it. We gotta take some slices from Luke. How about you make a new freaking pizza, man? How about you just go buy ingredients and make a new pizza? You don't have to subtract from, I don't know if that analogy made sense, but you don't have to subtract from another character to make a new character good. So anyway, very frustrated with modern movies. And like I said in the beginning, I went mad in space. I'm insane. And I started to regain my sanity when I crashed back to Earth and was able to watch all these great films that have been around for decades. But then I started losing my mind again when I'm watching these modern films. Not so much with this film. I was planning on watching a worse film, but this film is an amazing film. I was planning on reviewing a worse film, but this film is an amazing film. So anyway, I guess I'll leave you guys with that. Thanks for watching. I hope that this was an entertaining video in some way. And I know this is my first review, and I will get better from here. Just like Miles Morales slowly but surely gets better through as a hero in the movie. Hopefully I can do the same thing. Let me know what type of films you'd like me to review. I may or may not review them. I have a lot of films I want to review. But yeah, cool. And if you like this, please share with any friends that you think may also like this type of film analysis. Yeah. And another thing before I go, this is a podcast. It's live. At some point I would like to have a segment where I'm actually answering questions. And I feel like podcasts are so much better when there's a co-host. So I'm open to having like guests and co-hosts at some point, and to be on other people's podcasts and whatnot. But yeah, I like the conversational style a lot. Podcast style is the most entertaining for me. I like hearing conversations. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for watching.